Giri Haji, or translated into English, Duty Shame, is a British-Japanese crime thriller set in both Tokyo and London. You can watch it on Netflix. It's got 8 episodes, each around 50 minutes to an hour long. Google describes the series as a soulful thriller set in Tokyo and London, exploring the butterfly effect of a single murder across 2 cities, a dark, witty, and daring examination of morality and redemption. The story centers around Kenzo Mori, a Tokyo detective who becomes involved in a complex and dangerous web involving the Yakuza, British gangsters, and his family. The series begins in Tokyo and then moves to London by the end of the first episode, where the majority of the rest of the story takes place. It's one of those shows that gets you invested right away. The first episode sets up the whole story perfectly. It's able to establish its characters and their dynamics, give them background, and construct a world around them. The series continues to keep you invested in the plot with plenty of action, a healthy dose of comedy, and emotional weight, including a little romance sprinkled in as well. All of these elements blend and complement each other, making for a unified experience of a super entertaining and thrilling watch. The writing is good, the acting is great, with a couple key standouts which I'll get to in a bit, and the cinematography is on point, which I will also touch on. And in addition to all of that, it's got a great soundtrack. Alright, so now that we've got the basics out of the way, let me break down the main reasons why I enjoyed Giri Haji so much, and why I think you guys should definitely check it out if you haven't already. And if you haven't, fear not, this will be a spoiler-free review. On a surface level, the element of fusion in Giri Haji is pretty self-evident. It is a story that takes place in both Japan and England, and this quality of the narrative is inescapable within the experience of watching it. The series begins in Japanese with English subtitles and then transitions into English as Kenzo makes his journey to London. This transition is by no means black and white, as there is still plenty of Japanese spoken throughout the rest of the series, mixed in with English. Even just taking this one single component of the storytelling, language, and communication is a great way to identify this theme of fusion. Getting through and around the language barrier is a big motif throughout the show. There are characters who are bilingual, characters who need translation, characters who know some Japanese or some English, and in the show they are all trying to communicate with each other and understand each other better. Another element of fusion within the dynamics of the characters are the ideas of right and wrong, crime and the law. Both of these two relationships are muddled and become indistinguishable during the course of the show. The cops are working with the criminals are working with the cops, who is right, who is on the true side of justice, it's all connected, nothing is black and white. This theme of fusion extends beyond the characters and how they communicate with each other, and also becomes analogous to the audience's experience of the show and how the show communicates with us. This is a very intentional part of the show's design, matching its form with content. What do I mean by this? Well, let's start with the soundtrack. The music is a great mix of both Japanese and Western music. It's pretty hard not to notice this mixture while watching the show, but the fusion part is achieved in the way these two different types of music are used and in what context. While there are scenes or moments that we could say are in a Japanese or British context, the show doesn't always choose its music to fit that. Instead, it plays around with contrasting a scene taking place, say, in Tokyo with Western music, or perhaps a scene in the streets of London with traditional Japanese instruments, adding suspense to it. This is just another way the show constructs this theme of fusion and embeds it into the audience's experience, in both obvious and more subtle ways as well. Another way Giri Haji matches its form with content is in its cinematography. Without getting into an entire film studies breakdown, and in the interest of keeping this review at a reasonable length, I'll just ask that you keep an eye out for all of the different editing techniques that are used. There are so many stylistic tributes to both Japanese and British cinema that are found within shot composition, lighting, and editing, and anyone familiar with either respective cinematic style will definitely appreciate this. The end result is that this visual storytelling comes across looking beautifully composed and dynamic in its stylization. For anyone interested in studying film but haven't really had any formal training, here's a free tip. At the highest level of filmmaking, every shot should be a beautifully composed photograph. So if you're ever watching a film or a series and you want some kind of method to judge the quality of the cinematography, try to notice every scene, every shot, And notice how often you're able to pause the film or series and be able to say to yourself, wow, that could easily be a photograph. One other key aspect of cinematography that Giri Haji does a really good job of utilizing is the 4 quadrants in any given frame. There's a really good video on YouTube explaining the 4 quadrants that looks at the movie Drive with Ryan Gosling, and if I can find it, I will link it in the description. It's really interesting stuff. Definitely check it out if you're into filmmaking and studying it, even if you're just a casual viewer. So my point is, Giri Haji is up there, and while I wouldn't say it's flawless frame for frame, it's definitely no slouch either and comes up with some pretty beautiful looking moments. Part of what made this show so fun to watch was the crime-solving aspect of it. From the very first episode, I was having a blast trying to solve the mysteries and puzzles the show presented and established. I was thinking of motives, trying to pick up on secret plots and deceptions, and the show never let me down with its ability to create twists and turns. Although I very much appreciate the style in which Netflix releases most of its series, which is all at once in bingeable form, I also feel like it's kind of a shame, especially with a show like this, since it's one that I feel like would be so much fun to discuss. If it was released, say, weekly, I could definitely see people spending all week talking about their various theories on what might happen. In reality, though, the suspense, the pacing, it just makes it almost impossible to stop watching this show once you start. You find yourself in desperate need to know what happens next. Alright, so during the introduction to this review, I mentioned how good the acting is overall. And it is good. But there's definitely a notable standout in Giri Haji, and that is Will Sharp as Rodney. I have never seen him in any other series or film, but from the moment he is first introduced in Giri Haji, he begins stealing the show. He gives such a great and nuanced performance, and is able to pull off a truly amazing and layered character perfectly. Rodney is both a comic relief and a tragic case. Not that these two things are mutually exclusive by any means, but the ability to go from making the audience laugh out loud to making them feel his pain, sadness, and hopelessness so seamlessly, and often within one scene, is the reason why he just outshines everyone else. So aside from me just feeling it was necessary to mention Sharp as a standout in terms of his acting, his character Rodney is also a great place to start in my exploration into why I believe this show does such a good job with creating its characters and developing their relationships. Rodney acts as the glue for every one of the main characters that form a bond over the course of the show. Just so we're clear, I'm talking about the little surrogate family unit of Kenzo, Sarah, Taki, and Rodney. And you could also throw in Yuto as well. All of these characters share a common sense of being lost or feeling lonely in their lives, each in their own way. To avoid spoilers, I won't get into specifics, but keep an eye out for these qualities in not just this main group, but other side characters as well. It is a common thread that runs throughout the show, and it's why this bond that forms between Sarah, Tenzo, Rodney, and Taki is so meaningful. Each one of these characters is able to connect in some way with the others within this dynamic, and it just adds so much more depth to not only them as a group, but also individually. In other words, their individual personalities and feelings for each other combine to construct a mutually beneficial bond as a group, and this bond in turn also adds layers to each character individually as the show continues. And that, folks, is the way good character development is done. Also, I just want to add that I would be all for a spin-off series of Rodney and Taki's adventures in London, but that's neither here nor there. The last thing that I'm going to just quickly go over is the theme of the butterfly effect. If you don't know what that means, it's basically the idea that a butterfly, merely by flapping its wings, can cause wars to happen just by the cause and effect chain that it triggers. So in the show, it's all the decisions the characters make affect how everything turns out, what happens to them and the people around them. There are more than a couple instances where characters reference this, even to the point of literally spelling it out. But to be honest, it really, it didn't quite do it for me. I understood what they were saying and it came across well in the show. You could tell that the writers put a real effort into featuring it as a main theme. But when I think about the show as a whole and all the things that it does really well and what made an impact on me, let's just say that the whole butterfly effect thing wasn't really at the top of my list. To me, the question of morality was a lot more interesting in the show, as well as the character dynamics and their development. Anyways, I thought I'd just touch on that since the show definitely makes a point of featuring it. Alright, so the last thing I want to mention is I'm not going to give any spoilers away, like I said, but once you guys have watched the show, or for people that have already seen the show, what do you guys think of the rooftop scene? If you've seen the show, you're going to know what I mean. It's a very sudden change in tone and style, to say the least. It comes at a really dramatic and climactic moment. And I got to admit, when I first saw it, I was kind of laughing and thinking, what the fuck is this? But I don't know. As it went on, I actually felt it to be kind of powerful and cool. It grew on me, I guess. Anyways, let me know what you guys think. I'm really interested to know what other people thought about it. And yeah, I'll just leave it there. Alright guys, that's gonna do it for this review. I hope I've made a good enough case for you to go check this show out. And if you've already seen it, I hope you found my take on it somewhat interesting. Also, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos. I greatly appreciate it as always. And with that being said, this is 210 East, and I'll catch you guys next time.